How to produce Sam Smith's Unholy. Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing some music production tips and techniques that you can use in your workflow when creating your music while recreating the beat we hear in Sam Smith's Unholy. So let's dive right in. All right, let's start with the drum pattern. Now, for me personally, I'd like to start with a empty drum rack loaded with a couple sounds that inspire me and maybe kind of go in this kind of direction, and then actually create what I call the foreground beat, my kick, snare, hi-hat, maybe a couple extra percussions. I'll create that on one track using the drum rack. For me personally, it's a lot easier if I can just visually see the actual pattern, such as what we have here. Now, for me, that's visually easier to kind of just get the whole idea and the basic foundation of the beat down. But in a sparse track like this, where I would like to really add some nice nuances with the ear candy, I'd like to maybe do a reverse clap or add some really cool textures to this beat, which we can hear in the actual reference of the production. It really helps to set the stage for the vocals to shine. And then you're really catching a couple little nice ear candy things here and there that doesn't happen all the time. So for that, what I like to do is I then extract my kick, my snare, my clap, all from this drum rack. So then I have more of a bird's eye view of the overall pattern. And I know more or less the pockets in which I can insert all those cool little effects. This is what I'm talking about here. So we have the drum rack here, as you can see. And then what I want to do is now head over to the session view, which is somewhat the mixer, open up the drum rack, and just start highlighting each individual sound and separating the chain. So for instance, let's have the clap, and I'm going to hit extract change. This is now going to separate that from the drum rack and create its own MIDI channel here. And now I can go ahead and label that clap. Now, the reason why this is also very helpful is that if I wanted to just switch out the sample without having to go and switch out all the audio samples, I can just easily drag and drop that here. As you can see, it's creating a separate drum rack with just that one individual sample. I can just easily just use this the simpler here. If I just wanted to get rid of the drum rack, I can do the same thing as well. But I'll go ahead and do this for the other elements too. So I'll take the hi-hat, extract the chains, and so on. So let's go ahead and take this metal hit. I'll do that, and the rattle as well. Pretty much what I'll do is just leave the kick alone in its own place. And now I can just go ahead and label this kick, and here are all the other hits. And this is, again, this is just my personal workflow. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's a right or wrong. If you just want to go ahead and drag and drop your samples onto the arrangement review and just map it out that way, that might actually work much better for you. But I think, like I said, having the first initial foreground beat label out and then just going through and right clicking, it's a lot simple for me. So I've got this drum rack here that maybe I'll use for this individual sound here. So now that we've got the basic foreground beat here, we'll go ahead and solo those. Now I have them all visually here, and I can go ahead and just balance them out the way I'd like. And then just group them all together. We'll hit Command G. Well, let's just put all the percussion and drums all together. And this will be my drum bus right here. So now all the sounds are going to come out through here. So I'll move the drum bus plugin that I had on the drum rack originally, and now drag and drop that to the drum bus. So now what we have is everything in here all separate, nice and easy to visualize, to maintain, and I can run all the any sounds I wanted to through special effects. And so once I have them all extracted this way, I can then kind of somewhat do a hybrid where I start dragging and dropping wave files. I'll take specific type of sounds. And I like that because then I have more of a visual and I can do a lot more tweaking with the actual audio file than I probably could with just the MIDI. Also, we can add specific effects to certain hits to accentuate them. So, for instance, let's say we have this dry hi-hat here and we have the pattern. Maybe for these two hi-hats, I would like to add some reverb. Now I can automate it, or we can just simply duplicate this whole reverb track. And then what we'll do is just for this hi-hat section here, we'll have reverb. So I'll go into the audio effects, drag and drop reverb onto this track. And there you go. And we'll just take the dry out for that section there. And that can kind of be the overall vibe of what I'm trying to go for. So just copy that. Visually, it just helps for me to just give it another color. And also we'll just say verb hat and assign color to the clips. There you go. And then, like I said, I'll do a hybrid. I'll start to combine where now I'll drag and drop specific wave files. So let's add like a reverse to this initial like clap. So we'll get this clap here and I'll duplicate it. I could maybe freeze the track, commit it to audio if I wanted. It's just a lot more flexibility when I do it like this. So there's the clap here. And now what I want to do is just move this aside and hit the R button to reverse it. And then we can kind of just nudge this along here. Yeah, so that's kind of what I like to start to do. I start now creating this hybrid scenario where I started with having the drum rack in one piece so I can see the pattern, create the kind of foreground beat, extract them, and then just start combining the wave files in there that give me just more flexibility with how I can treat them, as well as start integrating some really cool sounds into the mix, such as like when we start incorporating little just nuances and sparse little ear candy throughout the track. So I might then want to just flip certain sounds, incorporate more sounds into the mix. But as you can see, this is just my particular workflow. I might be doing, for some of you, it might seem like I'm taking like 4 steps out of the way. But yeah, I mean, this is one way to look at it. There's nothing wrong with just simply just starting from the arrangement view and dragging and dropping the samples and creating the pattern there. That actually might be a lot quicker. So just wanted to show this in case this might actually entice others or someone like yourself who might be watching this video and be like, hey, I've never thought about that approach. That might make sense for me too. And then we have, like, continuing with that hybrid setup, a couple effects that we can then have to really accent certain moments of the overall verse pattern, such as sounds that I can then incorporate, which have a lot of tonal texture to them, but then maybe just having them in reverse and just strategically mapping them out. And this track, the drums and just the overall pattern really just gives a lot of space for these kind of ear candy things to really shine and spotlight. A lot of times in productions, we'd want to implement these type of things when there's a lot of busyness going on in verses or in choruses. So this is all about less is more, and it actually has a bigger impact when the vocals are present in the verses, because even the timing and the delivery, the do 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 do, right? You have an open window where you can then insert that, and you want to just take advantage of those windows, but not all the time, because then it just becomes right. There's no contrast to when it's not happening. So when you strip away the vocals, and when I was just recreating this, I'm thinking, man, this is really sparse. But that could be a good thing because it just lets the vocals breathe and it lets them shine and do what they're supposed to be doing. And so if you're struggling with how do I identify when I know that enough is enough and I don't have vocals, but all I have is just like this beat with a lot of cool little ear candy things, when do I stop doing that? Well, a good indication is if you're collaborating with someone, do you have enough where you can actually be inspired to write a melody from? And we're going to move to the bass line now. And that, just those two elements, the bass line and the drums, could really be the two main pillars that you need to get a melody going. It could even just be a kick drum. If you got a kick drum and a melody's coming to your head, put it down, because I'd rather have the melody drive the ship than a bunch of mini little captains of just ear candy trying to tell where the ship needs to be going. So I hope that makes sense in the grand scheme of things. I know something that came to my mind is like, okay, when I used to make tracks, and really what helped me is when I started collaborating with other writers and they would be in the room with me, I could just have like a simple beat and a chord progression, and that would be enough to inspire the other writers in the room to be like, oh, that's a cool vibe. Let's go in this direction. And then what that does is it really just restrains me for continuously adding just for the sake of adding. All right, so now let's go ahead and focus on the bass, which is really just the main melodic element going on throughout the verses. And so I'm going to use the Ableton Live wavetable for this, but you could follow along using any two or more oscillator, whether you're using Serum, if you're on Logic, any stock synth that you might have, you'll be able to get the same type of sound. So let's listen to the pattern. So immediately I'm going to start, instead of using a sine wave, a sawtooth wave. That's going to help me get more of that rubbery type of texture and sound. So oscillator 1, let's start with a sawtooth. Now, oftentimes, before you even touch anything, just try switching octaves. You'd be surprised with how close you can get to a sound you're looking for just by changing the octave. So I'll go let's try -24. And I might just go ahead and transpose this a whole nother octave lower. And then let's go ahead into the matrix here and assign the filter frequency to the envelope here. And we'll map that. We'll just go about here and lower the cutoff. It's cool. We'll enable oscillator 2, set this also for sawtooth, and we'll bring this down maybe a whole octave, maybe a whole octave lower, -24. But this will detune slightly. We're gonna just detune this so there's starts to give that chorusy type of edge to it. All right, now let's start with our amp envelope. We want it really short after the notes play. So that means bringing the release value down. And then as we go to envelope 2, which is going to control how much the filter opens up, let's bring the sustain down and mess around with the decay. This is all really just going to be for your preference, just messing around with the decay and sustain till you get a nice little sweet spot. Adding a little bit resonance will help accentuate that moment where the cutoff is kind of sloping down. All right, and now let's add some unison here. I'm going to try using the shimmer. And that really helps just widen up the sound, right? It's adding a little bit more voices to that. I'll go to oscillator 2, go up and down with the detuning. So the more you detune it, the more meaner it sounds. The less detune, the less of that mean growl you're going to get. Maybe turning on the sub oscillator. Cool. Let's add some saturation to this. So I'm going to head over to the audio effects and I'm going to go to drive and I'll use the saturator plugin. And for this, we'll use sine wave. Now, if you're following along using Logic, just use any type of, I think just any clipping, stock plugin that you might have. You can go to distortion and really just find anything that you can use to add some extra harmonics or saturation to this. I'll put the soft clip on and that'll kind of shave a little bit off the transients. So I'm just trying to find a sweet spot. I'll just move up and down the cutoff till I find like that cool rubbery texture. And if I'm having issues with that, an EQ will save the day. So we'll put an EQ here. And I notice that when I'm listening to the reference, I go back and forth. I like more of that rubbery type of texture or sound to it, but not necessarily in the middle of the tone. It feels like the wider signal or the stereo imaging or the signal on the side has a little bit more of that presence to it. So for that, this EQ, instead of the stereo mode, let's try mid side. So that the M mode really just focuses all what's going on in the middle here, the mid. And when you click this to S, you're now able to treat what's happening on the side, all that information on the side. So I want a little bit more of this section here. And now just back and forth with the voicing. All right. And then let's try a little bit of chorus just on top, or actually before the EQ. All right. Now let's see what that sounds like with the beat. So I might want to bring the decay down just a little so that that open up frequency cutoff just snaps back a little bit quicker. And now I've got like this sub sine wave type of bass just kind of following along, and especially really evident in the turnaround of the 4 bars where you have that pitch bend happening. And so for that, I'm using the wavetable again, and we're gonna have oscillator 1 set to a triangle or sine. I honestly just needed one oscillator set to a sine wave because this is just going to be a very low end, type of sound. And just to get a little bit more harmonics and beat from that, I've got the amp envelope right after that and an EQ to just take away some of the high end. Let's let the first bass line take more spotlight in this frequency range. And then just a sidechain compression so that when the kick hits, this sub bass can conduct a little bit here. But what's really important is that I set the sub bass to mono from polyphonic so that I don't get any overlap, and just shape the amp envelope so that the notes either linger a little bit to my liking or I can just snap them as soon as the note stops. So just about there. The reason why I had a separate oscillator set to triangle, because you'll get a little bit more presence, more growl this way. See, without it. So yeah, I wanted to be a little bit mean. I wanted to have this sinister type of growl. And so adding a little triangle to a sine wave can really accentuate that. And then the amp envelope and then the EQ to just kind of smooth things over. So this would be the low end with the regular bass and the beat. Now in this turnaround section here, we have this pitch bend. And so by default, if you're following along using Ableton, the wavetable will need a little bit adjusting so that the pitch bend can actually go to a specific range. So that's where you go into the MIDI matrix here. And where it says pitch, you have PB, which stands for pitch bend. And so I set it to about 9 semitones. I think by default, it's just set by 2. But you're going to increase this to 9, or you can put a whole octave. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go in here and automate. So in here we have MIDI control, pitch bend, and there you can see my pitch bend draw. So this determines when the note will be pitched up and at the rate it falls down. So you can kind of just draw that in to your liking and the speed that you want it to pitch up and down. And it's good to just take your time and really just going in and drawing things out so that they're really just snapping, and you have a solid take when it comes to automating a lot of this stuff. Since this track is really so detailed heavy, you know, a balance for me between the writing of a song and going too deep in all the details is that I just get the basic framework done. And once I have somewhat of a vocal or just a basic like idea melodically where I'm going to be headed, I can then kind of take the time to go in there and add all these details to it. Because what can happen is I can compromise and suffer for the sake of the song for the details of the track rather than let's get the song on the track, and then I can always go in there and just fix and tweak and do all these really cool things. Especially if I have vocals to work with, I can then do really cool things like add effects to the vocals and then like freeze some of those vocal effects and chop them up and really do cool things with them that can then accentuate all the details that we hear in the track. So Well, I hope this video was helpful for you and inspiring in any way. As my gift to you for watching this video, I love to give you access to a course that I've put together that walks you through every step of the production process to get that idea you have in your head to the DAW and out there for the world to hear. It's called Producing Your First Song. And this is especially great if you're just new to the whole music production process and you want a step-by-step guide and helping you do exactly that without the need of any expensive gear or any extra plugins. As a matter of fact, this course just walks you through how I use GarageBand to produce your song and no expensive plugins needed. Actually, I use all stock plugins in this course. So this is going to be especially great if you're just getting started and if you're a seasoned producer and you want to kind of brush up on the basic principles that can really be helpful in the season that you're in. I would definitely recommend the course as well. So you can click the link below in the description box or visit beatacademy.com/produce, beatacademy.com/produce, and have access at this course absolutely free today. Once again, thanks for watching. Stay up to date with upcoming videos by liking and subscribing to this video and sharing it with your friends. Let everybody know, hey, check this channel out. Thank you once again, and I'll see you next time.